All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating moment from over 2,500 years ago. It's a moment captured by the prophet Zechariah that, believe it or not, laid out a set of historical blueprints that would end up shaping the future in ways absolutely no one could have predicted at the time.
So, our story kicks off in the year 518 BC. A group of people from Jerusalem come to their prophet, Zechariah, and they ask him what sounds like a pretty straightforward religious question about a traditional fast. But here's the thing. Underneath that simple question, they were asking something much, much deeper.
Now, to really get where they're coming from, you have to picture their situation. They had just come back from this devastating 70-year exile in Babylon, so they're finally back in their homeland and they're taking on this huge project of rebuilding God's temple. But the reality on the ground was a huge letdown. Life was tough, and that grand, glorious future they'd been hoping for, it felt a million miles away.
So you see, this question about fasting, it wasn't really about fasting at all, was it? It was their way of asking something way more profound. Is the exile really finally over? Can we stop mourning? Can we finally move on? It was a question just loaded with exhaustion and, a little bit of fragile hope.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The answer they get from God, through Zechariah, completely pivots away from what they asked. It was like a divine course correction that just shifted the entire conversation.
And just look at the contrast here. It's night and day. The people, they're all focused on the outside stuff, the religious rituals, the ceremonies. But God just changes the subject completely. He basically tells them, hey, stop worrying about your fasting calendar and start focusing on true judgments, on kindness and mercy, and on protecting the most vulnerable people in your society. The message was that their rituals had become kind of meaningless, without real justice at their core. It's like God was saying, look, I'm not interested in your sleepy devotion, you just going through the motions. He wanted a fundamental change in how they lived, in how they treated each other. He wanted their worship to be lived out through social justice.
So the immediate solution being offered was crystal clear. If you want the experience of exile to be over, you have to start acting like it's over. You have to build a society that's actually founded on justice and compassion. That's where real restoration begins, not from the outside in, but from the inside out.
Now, this challenge wasn't just a critique, it wasn't just God telling them what they were doing wrong. No, it came with this incredible promise. Zechariah then gives them this powerful glimpse of what this new, just society would actually look and feel like.
He paints this amazing picture of a restored Jerusalem. And it's not with huge monuments or grand palaces. No, it's something way more meaningful. The ultimate sign of a healthy community? Streets so safe that the elderly can just sit outside, staff in hand, and enjoy the peace.
And then, on top of that, he adds the sound of pure joy. The city streets filled with boys and girls playing freely, without a single fear. And, this wasn't just about kids having fun. This was a vision of a community so secure and at peace with itself that its youngest members could just thrive.
And the final piece of this vision, the capstone, is a city so overflowing with God's presence and goodness that it becomes a global destination. People from every nation would flock there, not as conquerors, but as pilgrims, searching for God. I mean, what a complete reversal of their past trauma.
But believe it or not, this incredible vision, that was just stage one. What Zechariah did next was pull the camera way back, revealing a much deeper, more profound promise for the distant future.
The prophet starts to describe what scholars now call the return beyond the return. This wasn't just about coming home from Babylon. No, this was about a final, ultimate salvation. And right at the center of it was a mysterious coming king, a messianic figure.
Okay, so to really get this next part, we need to understand a key idea called typology. The easiest way to think about it is like a historical blueprint. It's when an earlier event or a person sets a pattern that points forward to a future, bigger, more complete fulfillment of that same pattern. So how exactly did Zechariah provide these blueprints that would, centuries later, be used to describe Jesus in the New Testament? Well, he laid out a series of these incredibly specific patterns.
Zechariah lays out these really vivid, dramatic scenes. First, you get this picture of a victorious king who shows up not on a war horse, but humbly on a donkey. Then things get really dramatic. The prophet himself acts out this little play where the leader is rejected and valued at the price of a common slave, 30 pieces of silver. And finally, this stunning prophecy that the people will one day look upon a figure they have pierced and mourned for him deeply.
And this is where it all clicks into place. Centuries later, the gospel writers looked back at these precise patterns, and for them, they were foundational. The blueprint of the humble king on a donkey, they saw that fulfilled in Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. The pattern of the shepherd sold for 30 silver coins, they saw that echoed in Judas's betrayal. And the prophecy of the one who was pierced, well, that pointed directly to the crucifixion.
So the bottom line is this. Zechariah created this powerful typology, this blueprint of a righteous leader who is rejected by his own people, and yet somehow that very rejection is central to their ultimate redemption. The New Testament authors looked at that pattern and saw it perfectly and completely fulfilled in the life, death, and story of Jesus.
A biblical scholar, Dr. Gary Yates, has this brilliant analogy for how this all works. He suggests that Zechariah saw the future kind of like looking at two distant mountain peaks. He could see both peaks clearly, the Messiah's first arrival and his final, ultimate victory. But what he couldn't see was the long, wide valley of time that lay between them.
And that leaves us with a final thought to kind of chew on. If even a prophet's vision had these kinds of gaps, if he could only see the peaks but not the valleys, what parts of the future might we be looking at today? What promises might we be holding on to, seeing only the distant mountaintops but not yet understanding the journey that lies between?